Hey, Flourish family. Welcome back to another episode of the Financial Flourish Podcast, where we help you flourish in finance and rise in freedom. I'm your host, Michele Pemberton, and I'm so glad that you're here today. Before we get started, I want to take a moment and say thank you to everyone who participated in the Financial Flourish Budget Reset Workshop. Thank you for registering. Thank you for attending. Thanks for everyone who supported me in whatever way. For those of you who attended, I just want you to know that I'm proud of you. And I really do mean that because it takes courage. It takes courage. Looking at your money takes courage. It's so easy to just push it aside. It's easy to stay busy. It's easy to tell yourself, I'll do it later. And it's much harder to sit down and say, okay, let me see what's really going on. Which brings me to today's episode, the money conversation nobody wants to have. Now, before you think I'm talking about talking to your spouse or your children or your family, that's not where we're going today. The conversation I'm talking about is the one that happens when it's just you. No audience, no judgment, no performance, just you and the truth. And honestly, that's usually the hardest conversation of all. I want you to imagine something. You have a destination in mind. Maybe it's somewhere that you have never been before, but you always wanted to go. So you jump in your car, you type the address into the GPS, and you hit start. And immediately the GPS starts calculating. Turn left, continue for 3 miles, go on this highway. Estimated arrival time is 5:31 p.m. Simple. But have you ever noticed what happened before the GPS gives you any directions? It asks you to find your location. So it either find your current location or it asks you to enter your location in. Not your desired location, not your dream location, but your current location, where you are right now. Now imagine opening your GPS and saying, I want directions. And the GPS asks, where are you? And you respond, I don't know. Then guess what? The GPS can't help you. Not because that destination isn't possible, not because the route doesn't exist, not because you're incapable of getting there. It simply cannot create a path until it knows your starting point. Financially, that's where many people are. Maybe that's where you are right now. You know exactly where you want to go. You know that you want less stress, you want more savings. Who doesn't? You want less debt, you want more freedom, you want more choices, you want more security, but you haven't identified where you are. Or maybe you don't want to. And that is the money conversation nobody wants to have. Let me give you another example. Have you ever had a closet that got completely out of control? Let's be honest. Not the closet you show your guests, the closet you keep the door closed on. The one where someone said they're coming, you just push everything in and you close the door. You know there's stuff in there. You know it's messy, you know it needs attention, but every time you think about it, you're thinking, not today. Because you know already it's going to be a big project. So instead of doing it, you keep closing the door. Weeks go by, months go by, sometimes years go by, until one day you can't take it anymore and you said, you know what? That's enough. I'm going to open the door and take care of this. And when you open the door, you notice that it is messy, but you also realize that it wasn't as bad as you thought it was in your head. That the anticipation of Cleaning up is worse than what's actually going on, and money works the same way. Sometimes the fear of looking becomes larger than what we're actually afraid of finding. And I see this all the time. Now, let's be honest. Nobody avoids their finances because of math, right? The math is not difficult. That's not a problem. It's normally more an emotional problem because money makes us feel exposed. It reveals our habits, our patterns that we have, the choices that we have made, which sometimes are not so good, priorities, and sometimes just our mistakes. And we don't want to be exposed to that. And if you're already feeling stressed or overwhelmed, you feel really bad, then you don't want to look at your numbers because then this is going to just shine a light on everything that's going on. And you definitely want to ignore that. So then the solution is that you ignore it. And as I've said before, it's not because you're lazy or irresponsible, but it's because you're human. Now, let me give you another example. Have you ever put off going to the doctor? You notice something doesn't feel right, but instead of scheduling the appointment, you decide to wait. You say, maybe it's nothing. Maybe it will go away. Maybe I'm just overreacting. And then weeks pass, months pass, and then you decide to go. And when you finally go to the doctor and talk to the doctor, the news isn't the best news, but you realize, it's not as bad as I thought. Because now you know, so you're not racking your brain and imagining all kinds of crazy stuff that might be happening in your body. Now you actually know. And since you know, then there's a treatment plan. The doctor can say, this is what we're going to do going forward. And so the same thing happened with your finances. You might not be able to solve the problem once you know, but at least you have direction. You're aware of what's going on. And awareness gives us clarity, as I've said before also. I've talked to people who were afraid to open their credit card statements, not because they didn't know they had debt, they knew, but they didn't want to see the number. And it's funny because not opening the statement doesn't protect you from the reality because you still owe the balance is still there. Even if you don't look, your interest is still accruing. So the avoidance does not stop the problem. The only thing that does is delays the solution. And I've seen that even with some people have their taxes that are due, and sometimes they come for years at a time to get their taxes prepared. And what we find out is it's not as bad as they thought. They didn't owe that much money. In so many cases, people are getting a refund. So that avoidance, is preventing us to get solutions to our issues right away. Now, what I've learned over the years is that most people don't manage money based on facts. It's not facts. It's based on stories they tell themselves. And then eventually they think that it's true. You have stories like, I'm not good with money, or I don't make enough, or I'll start next month. I'll get serious when things calm down. And what happens is that you tell yourself these things so long that you start believing them and you start living your life based on those stories. But once you get to the point where you challenge those stories, then you're going to see things begin to change because now you get clarity. Now, the interesting part is that when most people look at their finances, it doesn't make them feel worse because a lot of times it's not as bad as they think. And then once you know, at least the uncertainty is gone and then you don't feel so bad and you have a way of dealing with it now because you have the information. So you can put the next step together and you're not living in, in the dark. So let me ask you something, because this is a conversation about yourself, right? Let me ask you, what financial truth have you been avoiding? Is it your debt? Is it your spending? Is it the fact that, you've been saying, I'm going to start saving, but you haven't started yet? Or is it your habits, your financial habits that you've formed, or your priorities? So, what I would like you to do is to identify what that is, what financial truth you have been avoiding. And this is not to shame you or to judge you in any way, but just to make you aware so that you can start changing, right? So this week, I want you to do just that. It's going to be a challenge for the week. It's going to be simple, no 10-page worksheet, as I like to say, but you're just going to identify where you are now. Ask yourself the hard questions and look and see where you are starting from today. And then once you know that, then you're going to know what the next step is that you need to take. Remember, at the beginning, I said that the GPS didn't care about where you are. Like your location wasn't important. Well, it was important, but it wasn't to criticize you, it was just to get knowledge. It's the same thing with your finances. And once you know where you're starting from, then you can start putting a plan in place. Now, the money conversation nobody wants to have is really the conversation about honesty. It's about being willing to stop guessing, stop avoiding, stop hoping, and just start understanding what's going on. Because you cannot come up with a plan unless you know exactly what's going on. And once you know where you are, guess what that means? It means that you're no longer lost. You can start your progress. What we'll do next time is talk about what happens after you started your money journey. Because getting started is important, don't get me wrong. But actually staying on the road, staying on track is what causes you to transform your life. I'm hoping that you will have that honest conversation with yourself concerning your finances and where you are today. Remember our motto: flourish in finance and rise in freedom. You can't do that without knowing where you are now. So thank you so much for listening today. I would love if you connect with us on Instagram @_Financial Flourish, and find us on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast, Financial Flourish. Follow us so that you can keep up with anything that we post and the little tidbits that we give you, the episodes that when they're released, and I would really, really like to hear from you. So until next time, have that conversation. Be honest. And as you take one additional step towards your financial goal, don't forget to flourish.